Maybe some of your garden guru rub off on me because I'm also a Donna.
Oh, there you go.
I'm seeing Donna Garden Guru. That's not my title. I do like plants and outdoors, but I put my plants outside in the summer and they love it. In the winter, they just die so far back.
Yes. Well, maybe you'll find out some ways to do tonight because she talks about that. So I want to welcome everybody tonight. I'm Andrea. I work here at the library. So if you have any questions about the library or where houseplant care books are, we have a bunch here too, that I can help you with that. And we actually are doing a hybrid program tonight. So it's being streamed live to our Facebook and our YouTube channel, and it's recorded. So if you want to watch the program again, it's on our YouTube channel. I want to say hi to everybody online if you're there. Welcome and thank you for joining us. Tonight, we have Donna, who's our garden guru from the Master Gardeners of Wood County. She's a volunteer there, and she always does these programs for us, and it's so nice because she is a wealth of knowledge. And she prefers you to ask the questions during the program so she can address it right away if she's talking about something. So go ahead and interrupt her nicely. Same with online. If you have a question during the program tonight, go ahead and write it in the chat, and I'll holler it out for Donna to answer, and we'll get those questions answered as we go. She always asks for questions at the end too, and future ideas for other Garden Guru programs, because we always like to know what the interest is in the community and what other programs we might have to offer. So think about that too while you're paying attention. So I'm going to turn it over to Donna and thank her again for doing this for us.
Okay, get situated here. All right, we're going to be talking about house plant care tonight, and people here in person were just saying it would be nice to have these big windows in our houses in the winter time for all that sun we might be able to be getting in. So unfortunately, not everybody has that. So we're going to talk about some things you can do to keep your house plants healthy. Why do we have houseplants in our home? Houseplants stimulate our senses, just like being outside. They provide greenery, and we know that there's a lot of different things about being near green things. They're finding more and more things about that. The Japanese even have a term for it. They call it forest bathing, to go out and just walk in an area where it's green. And so, it's nice to have those green things in our houses too. We also have the different senses. Some plants are spiky or soft or fuzzy. Some have fragrances. They can be colorful. If you're growing herbs, even tasteful. So there's lots of living things that we can have plants for in our house. We talked about something living in green, especially during the winter here when there's like nothing green outside except, evergreens. They found that having plants in a workplace also increases productivity in the workplace. And I think it's just that soothing thing about having green plants there. You can use plants as a decorating statement also. Particularly if you put it in a decorative pot or you have a special place where you can display a plant, it can become part of your interior decorating. Growing plants helps you to learn something new about the plants all the time. We always need to be searching for answers to questions that we have maybe about the plants, what's happening to the plant, or why is it doing this or that. So we can always learn something new. Useful in the kitchen for aroma, for maybe decorating food, for affecting the flavor of food when we use herbs and that sort of thing. Plants are living things. As part of their process of photosynthesis, they take in carbon dioxide and they give off oxygen. It's not a lot for houseplants, but it still is some. And then they also release water into the air to increase humidity in the wintertime too, as plants make their sugars and things through photosynthesis. One of the other byproducts is water. So that's what the plants give off. And you can notice that in the summertime, if you're someplace where there are a lot of plants, it's really humid. So, okay. What is the basis of house plant care? There's a couple of things that determine what kind of house plants you're going to have and how you're going to grow them. How much light do you have, and what kind of light is it? We can have low light. We can have very bright light, for example, next to a south window. Sometimes you may have to use artificial light for some plants to make them grow their best in the wintertime. If that's what you choose to do, then, you have to make provisions for how are you going to provide the light and that sort of thing. How much water a plant needs is another factor in determining what kind of plants you can have in your house and what kind of care you're going to have to give them. What temperature do they grow best at? Some of our plants need really warm spaces, and other plants prefer more cool spaces. The growing medium, different kinds of plants need different kinds of soil to grow in. For example, succulents need a much more coarse, sandy soil than, say, tropical plants. And some plants need no soil at all. They're called air plants. And they grow basically without, just from the water that you spritz them with. And then how much fertilizer are you going to give the plant? Again, the kind of plant determines how much fertilizer they get. Also, you have to figure into your situation of growing houseplants. Do you have pets, and what kind of pets? And are they able to access where you have your plants? Do you have children? Because there are some plants that are toxic to people. And so you want to make sure that we're not growing plants that could be toxic to children if they eat parts of the plant. How much time do you have to spend taking care of your houseplants? Some houseplants take a lot of care, watering at least once a week, maybe more often. And some houseplants, you can go away for 2 or 3 weeks and they won't even know you're gone. So, and then how much space do you have too? That more determines what size of plant you have. This picture that's behind all of the printing here, if you have that much space, obviously you can grow some very large plants, but not everyone has that much space. Okay, plants have differing needs for light, depending on where the plant grows natively. Many of our houseplants come from tropical regions, and so they're either used to very bright, strong sunlight, or sometimes it could be very deep shade if it's a tropical kind of plant that grows like in the jungle or attached to trees in the jungle, let's say. Plants that require bright light will need a south or a west window for best results. This is especially important in the wintertime. You need to keep plants within 2 feet of a window. The amount of light or the intensity of the light falls off very quickly the further you get away from a window or a source of light. So if it's a plant that needs bright light, you're going to need to keep it within 2 feet of the window, either a plant stand or a plant rack of some kind, or, but you don't want to get it so close, especially in Wisconsin, because you don't want to freeze the plant, for example, by setting it right on a windowsill in the wintertime. If you don't have enough light and you find out later that your plant is not doing well enough, you might have to provide some artificial light too. Low light plants can be grown almost anywhere in your house. They would require maybe a north or an east facing window, or maybe further back in a room if you have south facing windows. And a mid-level light plant would probably be growing best in an east exposure window. We talked about don't set them too close to the glass in the winter, especially at night, and never put your plant between the drapery or, window coverings and the window at night, And then because plants have that light from only one side in the house, you have to turn them 180 degrees. And a good idea is to do that whenever you water. Otherwise, you'll have the plant growing towards the window, or one side of the plant will be much fuller than the other side. Yeah. Okay. Tropical plants need higher humidity and soil moisture. And if it's a tropical kind of plant and it's not getting enough humidity and moisture, very often the ends of the leaves, the tips of the leaves will turn brown or will kind of get crispy and fall off. Desert plants, on the other hand, need a lot less moisture. And sometimes you can put plants in your home based on the amount of moisture there is. For example, kitchens generally have more moisture and bathrooms. So if you have places to put plants in those spaces, those that need more moisture and humidity, those would be good places to put them. And the other, like if you have south-facing windows and you have plants that prefer not to be so wet, that might be a good place for them. Always test the soil moisture before watering. Probably one of the more common things that happens to plants that don't do well is we're overwatering them. So don't just look or feel the top of the soil. Actually put your finger in and see if it's dry down a little farther than that before you water. Any plant that you are going to put in a pot has to be in a pot that has drainage holes in the bottom. And that's whether you have it inside or outside. Because if you don't have drainage holes, the water collects on the bottom of the pot and that rots the roots. When you water plants, water until it comes out the bottom, but then you need to empty the water that's in that saucer after 5 or 10 minutes. If it's not absorbed back up into the pot, you need to empty that. And one of the things to consider when you're buying a plant for a house plant is, do you tend to be an overwaterer or an underwaterer? Some people, just go about watering whether the plant needs it or not. And, Wednesday is the day I water my plants. I'm watering everything. Or then there's the other kind of people who think, oh, I think that plant needs water because it's drooping way over, So again, if you're an overwaterer, you might look to having plants that require a lot of moisture and humidity because you'll be probably doing less damage to those plants. And if you're an underwaterer, you're going to be looking for something that's not going to require a lot of water. And whenever you're watering, be sure that you water the soil, the surface of the soil, and not the foliage. So don't pour the water over the leaves of the plant and get them wet, because that tends to lead to crown rots and leaves that rot too. So those are some things to remember about watering. If you happen to be one of those underwaterer persons, or you discover that your plant has really wilted before you got around to watering it, one of the ways to kind of revive those plants before you just decide, well, it's a goner, I'm just going to throw it out, is to water. Well, let me back up. When the soil gets really, really dry, it's very hard to hydrate it again, especially potting soil. So what you need to do, especially if you water and, this plant is really thirsty, obviously, but the water just runs right through. That's what's happening. The soil is not able to soak it up. So what you need to do is set the pot in a deep container and add water almost up to the surface of the soil and just let the pot soak for a little bit. You will probably see little bubbles coming out of the surface as though the spaces between the soil fill up with water again. And when the bubbles stop, then you can take the pot out, set it on a saucer, let it drain really well, dump out the water that's in the saucer, and then, leave it sit for a couple days and see if it comes back to life. If it doesn't after that, then it's probably toast. So, but some people say, oh, I threw it away. Well, maybe it was salvageable. Okay, temperature, again, depends on the origin of the plant. Did it come from the tropics? Did it come from the desert? And warm temperatures can sometimes be found near heat registers or other heat sources. If your heat is forced air, though, that spot also might be very dry. So when you're trying to find warmer places, take into consideration whether that's a lot of air movement also, or if you have radiator kind of heat, that the air doesn't move that much. So someplace near that would probably be safer. Cooler temperatures can be found in unused rooms or sometimes bedrooms. We keep our bedrooms sometimes cooler than the rest of the house. So if you have a plant that prefers cooler temperatures, those might be some good places to put that plant. In any case, no matter where you put it, try to avoid putting a plant where it's going to be in the draft when you open the door all the time, because that fluctuation in temperature is not good for almost any plants. They don't like that. They kind of like to be like where they are and the comfort or temperature that they're at. The planting medium and fertilizer, you need to choose a soilless mix. In other words, a potting soil. Don't bring in dirt from outside or soil from outside in your garden. It's much too heavy. It'll pack down. It won't hold the moisture. A coarser mix is more preferred for succulents. In winter indoors, plants do not need a lot of fertilizers until it gets to like late winter, early spring, and you'll often see new growth starting then. And at that point, you can start to fertilize again. And then start with half-strength fertilizer too. And then if you're going to put them outside during the summer, then you would probably use full strength once they're outside and they're growing really well. You can use houseplant fertilizer or just regular garden plant fertilizer, but use it at a half strength until the plants go outside. If you take your plants outside during the summer, bringing them indoors in the fall is a big change for that plant. The light is much, much less. And for that reason, like when we set out plants in the spring, we harden off, which means we gradually get them used to the outside. And in the fall, you need to reverse that process. So in the spring, you would put them outside in a sheltered spot with a little wind, out of the sun for a little while, a couple days, and then you gradually move them to a sunnier spot if it's a sun plant. In the fall, you do the opposite. You start wherever the plant is and you gradually move it to shadier spots so that the plant gets used to the light level. They actually have kind of different kinds of leaves when they're outside and when they're inside. And don't be surprised, even if you do that, if the plant drops most of its leaves. That's pretty common. And it'll grow new ones that are better adapted to the lower light level. A lot of times the leaves might be a little bit bigger, a little bit thinner, so that they have more space to absorb the lower level of light. When you're bringing them in, look very carefully for any insects that are on the plant, or if you see any larvae, which would be like caterpillars or immature forms of insects, or eggs. Because once you bring them inside, you're going to bring those critters in with you. And if you have plants that stayed inside all summer, you'll infect those too. Keep your outdoor plants separate from your indoor plants for a couple weeks to see what develops as far as insects on the plants. We talked about reducing the watering and reducing the fertilizer until later in the winter or early spring, and then reverse the process, hardening off in the spring before you put them outside again.
When I first started bringing plants in, I used to clean the pots up, but I didn't really do much with the soil. But and then I had these fungus gnats that were annoying. But what I did learn was that if you remove the top inch or so of the soil in the pot and clean it really well so that there was no organic material there, and so any eggs that were laid on top of that surface were you discarded that and I put new potting soil on, that I didn't have that same problem. So
Yeah.
it was great. It worked really great.
Yeah, the other thing sometimes people say is to put a very light layer of sand on
That
top of the
worked too.
soil,
Yeah.
and that discourages
Make it
them.
drier, yeah.
Yeah, discourages the fungus gnats from laying the eggs in
Yeah.
the soil and hanging around. So yeah, and that's why we keep them separate, because you want to be able to control it just on those couple
That's
plants
right.
before it gets to all your other plants. Yeah, and they're really annoying. They just kind of fly
I know,
around.
and I'm so frustrated. But it was really worth it to clean up the pots and clean up around the pots, like all this. And I didn't have a problem after that.
Yeah, good idea. Yep. If in case our online audience couldn't hear, when somebody said here they took the top layer of soil off out of the pot and cleaned that out really well, and then put some new potting soil on top, and that kind of prevented the fungus gnats from laying eggs and continue to breed. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, sometimes we like to have more houseplants without having to buy more. So there are different ways of propagating houseplants too. Depending on the kind of plant, you can divide the plant just like you would divide things outside, or take leaf or stem cuttings and start new plants from that. There's a kind of chemical called a rooting hormone that speeds root formation. It's not necessary, but it makes the root formation a little bit faster. And research your kind of plant to find out what the best method is to propagate, whether it's division, a leaf cutting, or a stem cutting. When you're dividing a plant, make sure that each section has some roots attached to it and also some top growth, some leaves or stems. One of the easiest ones to probably do that, you might be familiar with, is like an aloe plant, where it makes those offshoots, and you can just separate those, and you can make more plants out of that. A plant that has a single stem and a fibrous root system, so lots of roots coming out from that single stem, is not one that's likely to be able to be propagated by division, because there's no way to divide that. So you would probably use a stem or a leaf cutting from that one then. If you're going to take a stem cutting, you take just a couple inches of the stem and trim off the lower leaves, probably 2-3 sets of leaves, and then you can dip that in the rooting hormone and stick it in some very, very moist potting soil. The new roots will form where those leaves were attached, those nodes. That's where the new roots will form. It's a good idea to put a plastic bag just loosely over that cutting, because that will keep it from losing excessive moisture until it gets roots to support itself again. And you want to use the newer tender shoots, the ones on the end of branches, if you're going to try to start another plant. If the stem is already woody, more towards the bottom, it's not going to work as well for rooting. Please place each cutting in a separate pot. And then once they are set in there for a couple weeks, maybe 4 to 6 weeks, you can just give them a gentle tug and see if there's some resistance there. If there is, then you know that it's growing roots, and it could then be transplanted into another pot, or moved wherever you want to put it. Whoopsie, back up here. Okay, repotting. Sometimes plants get really big, especially if you have them for a number of years. So if you turn over a pot or loosen it and find out that the roots have completely filled the pot, and they're probably going round and round, it's probably time to repot. Another clue is if the water seems to go straight through the plant, no matter how much you water it, it just goes right through. Means that the roots have taken up the whole container, and there's very little soil left. So when you're repotting, though, only go up like one size a pot. Don't go from a 8-inch pot to a 14-inch pot. You'll have too much soil. It'll stay too wet for too long. Shake the soil from the roots and add new soil into the larger pot. Make sure that you water until all the soil is moistened, or better yet, moisten the soil before you put it in the pot, because potting soil, if it's really dried out, it doesn't take up water very well. And if you put all the stuff in there and say, oh, I forgot to put in the water, do that thing with the wilted plant. Just set the whole thing in water until it soaks up enough. And sometimes we've got the pots as big as we can handle. Oops. So maybe instead of going to a bigger pot, you do some root pruning. All those roots that are going round and round and round. One of the things you can do is just make a slice down the side in about 3 or 4 different places, or untangle some of those and just trim them off so they're shorter, so you have less roots in the pot. Because sometimes some of those big indoor plants can get quite big, and you kind of get to a point where I don't think I can handle a bigger pot. So that's one way to do it. These are some common diseases that you might run into in houseplants. Or I should say, these are the 3 kinds of common houseplant problems. We have disease, root rots, and crown rots. And we're going to talk a little bit about each one of those. Okay. Insects are a common thing, especially if you've had your plants outside and then brought them in. Or if you've gotten a new houseplant and the insects come with the houseplant, and all of a sudden you see them all over your houseplants. So these are some common ones. This is brown scale here. It's kind of a brownish, looks like a bump on the stem of a plant often. A scale, as it gets older, gets a harder cover on it. So it's very hard to just spray that with something, because it kind of has like armor that keeps the spray from going in. So in that case, you almost have to use alcohol and a cotton swab and just rub that on there until it lets go. Aphids are common to come in with your plants in the fall when you bring them in, because you've probably got the eggs somewhere in the soil or on the plant. And they're little, not quite round, but they have lots of legs, and they could be any color. There could be red, green, blue, it just depends on what they're growing on a lot of times. We talked some about fungus gnats. It's a dark fly, very tiny. Spider mites are almost microscopic, but what you'll probably see is this fine webbing on a plant. And that's a clue that you might have spider mites. They prefer like warmer, dry air, so winter air inside your house. Thrips are very, very, very tiny animals, but what they do is they get in and they chew on leaves or stems, and they will cause like this on this flower, the change in color there, because they've taken the sap out of parts of the flower. White flies are kind of like the fungus gnats, except they're white, and you can see them a little bit better. When they're sitting and resting, they're kind of a triangle shape. And then mealybugs are another critter that really it kind of looks like cottony stuff on the plant. So those are some common ones that you'll see. And then some other things that happen with houseplants, browning leaf tips, and that's more often caused by too dry air. Some plants are very sensitive to chlorine and fluoride that might be in the water, and they will tend to get the brown tips on them, like this one over here. Dropping leaves is not uncommon when you bring the plant in from outside. And if it's not getting enough light, it might be dropping leaf. It might cause it to drop leaves. Again, stretching and getting real tall and leggy, that's not enough light. So you would need to increase the light. And actually, if you have plants inside for a long time, you should be cleaning the house plant. This sounds kind of, like overkill, but if the plant is small, you can set it in a bathtub or a shower and just shower it off, let it dry, and then put it back. If it's a bigger plant, you may have to actually take, a cloth and, clean off some of the leaves. What happens is that the leaves acquire dust and dirt, just like you wash cabinets and things in your kitchen because it gets grease on it and dust. And then the dust interferes with how much light the leaves can absorb. Do you have a question?
Yes, you mentioned the problems with fluorinated and chlorinated water. Are there any issues that we should be aware of when you have well water?
Probably not. You're more likely to have more minerals sometimes in well water, but that would probably help the plant more than hurt, unless it's, really a strong concentration of some particular.
We have a water filter near the where the water comes in from the well in the house. And then in the kitchen, we have another under the counter filter. Is it better to use the filtered water or just the cold tap water that hasn't gone through another filter?
I guess if your water doesn't show a lot of signs of, excessive minerals in it, either one is probably okay.
We have a lot of iron.
Iron doesn't really usually affect a plant that much. If you start to see that the plant looks funny, then I would maybe experiment and try doing it with the filtered water then.
We have well water, and I wondered too when I first came about that, but we also have a water softener. So my plants have been okay.
With a soft water or the well water?
I just water right out of the tap.
With soft water?
And softened to some degree anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have a water softener too, but I don't know if that just softens the hot water or.
I think it softens it. Both the hot and cold with the oven.
Depends where you have it placed. I think in your house, if it's near the entrance of your house, it's going to filter all the water. If you have it right in front of your water heater, when it goes into the water heater, then you're probably only filtering the hot water. So also, if you're having trouble with the brown tips due to chloride and fluoride, if you have city water, or treated water, then using like distilled water is probably a good solution. Yeah.
I mean, it would be better to use spring water than distilled water.
Rainwater is fine too. If you,
distilled water is okay too.
yeah, especially if you have, like you live someplace where the water is treated like municipal water.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, that sounds good.
Yep. Using pesticides and insecticides, sometimes we have those insect pests, and there are, sometimes we have to use these kinds of things. But the key to this is be sure you understand or know what the insect is before you start using any kind of insecticide or pesticide. If you use the wrong one, it's not going to have any effect at all, and the insects are just going to keep coming and coming and coming. Many times we can, control diseases and insect pests by manipulating the environment, like, looking to see whether it has anything on it when you bring it in from outside. If you're buying a plant from, a nursery or a flower shop or something, look it over and make sure that it looks healthy, that you can't see anything on it. Most places don't intend to sell you plants with insects on it, but sometimes it just happens. Most of the places, if you go to a florist or something, it's pretty humid in those places. Lots of plants come in and out and in and out. So but try doing things without chemicals if you can, like increasing or decreasing watering. Like with fungus gnats, they really like that wet soil. So you can do something like cleaning out that top layer of soil, putting some sand maybe on the surface of the soil, or pebbles or marbles or something like that, to keep that wet surface from being so readily available to them. Better air circulation. If the plant looks like it needs some fertilizer, helping fertilize it, make it stronger so it can resist some of the insects and diseases. And if you're going to use pesticides, always read the label and follow it exactly. The labels are put on there, for your safety, and so that you use it in the right way. If you don't use it in the right way, you're liable. You can't go back to a company and say, this didn't work, or I burnt my plant, or it killed my plant or something, because you need to use it exactly as it says. Also look on the label before you use it. Is it safe for the plant you're going to use it on? Because not all of them are safe to use on every plant that we have. So identify your plant first, identify your pest first, and then choose the appropriate treatment. And where can you find that out? I'll give you some resources to use at the end, or how can you find that out? Let's see, where are we now? Okay. Some other considerations when you're growing houseplants. Do you have animals in your house? For cats and dogs, the ASPCA has a list on their website of plants that are safe and plants that are toxic to various kinds of animals. Some people have more unusual pets, horses and turtles and gerbils and, all kinds of other things. So, and each animal, is susceptible to different plants too. What might be safe for your cat might not be safe for your dog, and vice versa. Mulch the top of the soil with large bulk pieces, crumbled aluminum foil, pine cones, or stones to keep pets from digging in pots and using them as litter boxes, especially cats. So make that surface of the soil very unwelcome to them, that they don't want to use that. As far as chewing on plants, I guess keeping them out of reach of the animal, which is sometimes kind of hard with cats.
They get everywhere.
Yeah. I don't know if there is such a thing as, something you could put on the plant that would make it taste bad. I don't know. I don't know either.
They destroyed a spider plant.
Yeah. That has stuff hanging down, nice to swat at, and yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you have those kinds of things, maybe putting plants in hanging planters or on high shelves, like on the top of a bookshelf or something like that. Trim dangling plants to reduce temptation. So things like spider plants, they get the babies that come down and stuff. You might not be able to grow any plants that have those dangling parts. Might be able to find on ASPCA some homemade or commercial repellents too. I don't have them off the top of my head. And then scare tactics too, like putting a kind of mean, but like a mouse trap that when they get close to it, and it snaps, or, if the cat's going to go after a certain thing or whatever, just sitting there with a spray bottle, and every time they go towards the plant, spray them. So you kind of know your pet best and what's going to deter them. Some of them, that wouldn't deter them, but some of it would.
Not there.
Yes. So, you kind of have to get imaginative. As far as children, visit any of the children's hospital websites or ask a pediatrician for plants that might be toxic to children. Some plants are poisonous in that they will cause some serious harm, like they'll cause a child to lose consciousness, quit breathing, things like that. And others are just irritating. They'll cause them to, get a tummy ache or throw up or, cause a rash and that kind of thing. So be sure that again, what kind of plants you're bringing into the home, and that you actually identify them accurately. So look for the Latin name of the plant, not just the common name, because a common name is different in different parts of the country for the same plant. So you want to identify the Latin name of a plant, so you make sure that you're matching up that plant, that's the one your child shouldn't be in contact with. Mushrooms, although they're not technically plants, they're fungi, but they can also be dangerous. And sometimes you might find little mushrooms and things growing in potting soil and that sort of thing. And then again, really know that the scientific name of your plant, so that if the child does eat a part of a plant or whatever, or it's causing irritation, if you call the poison control center, that you know exactly what plant you're talking about. Because, like I say, in different parts of the country, different plants will be called the same name, for example. I know we were out west someplace and somebody called this wild plant a name, and I said, well, that doesn't look like what we call that name. That doesn't look like the name of a plant we have here. It's not the same plant. It was what I'm trying to say. But they called it that name, and we called a different plant the same name. So be sure that you know the scientific or the Latin name of the plant. And if you're a grandparent, you might also check to see that the plants you have in your house are safe too. Most parents of little kids are aware of that, but we kind of forget about that as the kids grow up and leave home and stuff, that you might have plants that might hurt grandchildren or other little kids that come to your house. We talked about, looking at what kind of indoor space do you have before you go out and buy a plant? What kind of air quality do you have? If you have forced air, heating in your home in the wintertime, that's much drier air than if you have, say, electric heat or, something where the air is not moving all the time. How much time and energy can you afford to invest in house plants? So, think about that before you choose a plant, and then choose plants that match your style. And maybe even look at what matches your decorating style too. Ask the florists or people at garden centers about what kind of care the plant requires before you buy it, so that it's a good fit for you. And always inspect plants, even if you're buying it from a place that you think should have healthy plants, because that's their business. And avoid purchasing from big box stores where the care is really pretty haphazard. You don't know where that plant's been, what it's been hanging around with, how long it's been in the store. People that sell plants for a living, like flower shops, garden centers and stuff, they're pretty careful that they're giving you good plants because their reputation is at stake. Just some general plants that need bright light. All of the cacti and succulents are plants that need bright light. Most plants, if they are a flowering plant or will produce flowers, need very bright light in order to do that. The plant will survive, but it might not produce flowers if it doesn't have enough light. A Norfolk Island pine is another one that we think of, well, maybe, it's a pine tree. It shouldn't need real bright light, but it does. Croton plants and sago palms are some examples of plants that would need quite bright light in your house. I'll give you a minute. I see you're writing.
I know. I'm done.
Okay. These can tolerate pretty low light. Philodendron, pothos Pothos looks like a philodendron, but it has variegated leaves, yellow and green variegation. Chinese evergreen is a low light plant. Cast iron plant. That's probably one that's going to be really hard to kill. Snake plant is another one that's really hard to kill. So if you aren't sure of how green your thumb is, you might start with some of those. The ZZ plant is another one. Parlor palm. And if they tell you that it's a low light house plant, wherever you're buying it, those are pretty safe for low light levels. The next category is if you tend to overwater, these are the plants that like moist conditions. Papyrus, spike moss, peace lily, baby tear, ferns, and any other house plant that says tolerates moist soil. And then these are the ones that can get along if you forget to water. If you're an underwaterer, succulents and cacti are pretty forgiving. The ponytail plant, ZZ plant, cast iron plant, and snake plant. So those last three there, ZZ, cast iron, and snake plant, those are both low light and low water needs. And so those are some really good ones to start with if you're just getting into house plants.
That picture is the snake plant, that tall one?
That's this one right here.
Okay.
Some people call it mother-in-law's tongue.
Okay, that's what I was just gonna ask.
Mhm.
That's what I had been told it was called, mother-in-law. So that one likes lower light.
Lower light, and it doesn't need to be watered real often.
Okay, so that's the one I had questions on.
Mm-hmm.
Because I inherited a wicker planter that had been in my grandmother's house for years, and it had some plants, mother-in-law tongues there. Then later on, so now I'm feeling an obligation to keep my grandmother's plant alive. Then I find out that the plant thing was really from her mother. It's my great grandmother that I never met.
Yeah.
I still have the plant. Well, I repotted it, and now it's got a lot of little things, and they droop like that. I can't get them to stand up. So am I overwatering, you think?
Might be overwatering or fertilizing, over fertilizing. Plants tend to get droopy when they're fertilized.
I don't fertilize hardly ever. I did bring it outside this year to see if it would perk up, and it sprouted more shoots on the bottom.
Yeah.
But then they get to a height and they keep toppling over. I'll check the soil though. I may have put garden soil in there too. Maybe it needs just potting soil.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Did you fertilize it?
I don't remember if I fertilized.
I don't think it needs much fertilizer.
Sometimes potting soil has fertilizer in it too.
That's true, yeah.
So you might want to. Yeah.
I said this is from my grandmother.
Can you just take those off?
Yeah, can I propagate those little ones that are growing out of the bottom?
Yeah, that's one that you can propagate by division.
Yeah.
So to make sure it just has some roots and some top leaves.
So that if they die in one plant, I'll have a back.
Yeah, I've got a pothos that my husband's mother had, and I'm not sure how far it went back after that, but everybody in the family has a piece of grandma's plant. And she had it in a sunroom, and it actually grew up and went all the way around the sunroom several times. So yeah, it sort of made you feel like Little House of Horrors or whatever that was, where the plants. No, pothos plant. You know what a philodendron is?
I know the name. I don't remember what it looks like.
It's a vine, a vine type plant.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Like the Florida, sometimes you see them growing up trees that go up and up and they get
Mhm.
really big. It's the same plant, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, basically, but.
Yeah, it's more of a tropical kind of plant. And then another thing, possibility, if you're talking about houseplants, is to do a terrarium. And there's two kinds of terrariums. There's a tropical terrarium and then a desert terrarium. So a tropical one is a moist environment and it needs a cover to keep the moisture in. So you could do it in an aquarium, for example, or you can get a fancy jar, a regular terrarium jar. A desert terrarium needs a dry environment, and that should not have a cover on it because it'll get too moist. If you're going to do that, choose plants that have the same growth rate and are the similar size. And then, you can decorate it adding, stones, figurines, other kinds of things to make it pretty. And some people also get into things called fairy gardens too, where you have miniature plants and then also miniature little figurines and things. So those are some other things that, if you want to get into houseplants and doing that sort of thing too. They're kind of fun, but it's going to take more time and effort to do something like that. So, okay, where did my last slide go? Oh, there it is. Okay, we got an extra one in there. Back to what I said, to find out how to treat like an insect invasion in your plants or something. This is how you do that. Let's say you have fungus gnats, or you want to have fungus gnat control. Then you put the word extension or this site:.edu after it. So, for example, here, white flying insect on houseplants, extension or white flying insect on houseplants, site:.edu. What that does is bring up university research sites and other educational organizations that have done research on these kinds of things. So they will give you information. Very often it comes up with pictures so you can identify what you have. Make sure that it's the insect that you have on your plant. And then it'll also give you suggestions on how to control it. Either, environmentally, like using, something over the top of the soil for fungus gnats, or if you need to go with something that's like a chemical spray of some kind. If you're doing this for houseplants, that's kind of a universal thing because we all live in houses. But if you're doing this for outdoor plants, you would want to choose a site from a university that's close to Wisconsin, if not Wisconsin, or one that has a similar climate. Like New York is not close to Wisconsin, but it has a kind of similar climate as we do in Pennsylvania. And those are two states that have a lot of information, horticultural information. Their colleges are kind of, famous for that. So you wouldn't want to choose, like for outdoor plants, something that's coming from Georgia or Texas or California, because those climates are so much different. Other more reliable sites are ones that end in .org or .org. For example, you might have African Violet Society, things like that. And they're often focused on a single plant or a single plant species. Avoid anything that ends with .com because you don't know what you're getting there. So, but that's one way to find the information that you need. When I do these programs, if it's not a topic that I'm personally familiar with, that's what I do. I go to these sites, gather all the information and learn about it myself so that I can teach it to you. So, any other questions?
Well, back to the snake plant.
Mm-hmm.
Then for winter, would I want an east window or a west window?
It's a low light plant, so probably an east window or further back in a room, even if it has a south facing window, but the plant is
I don't have any south facing windows.
Yeah.
The garage is there, so I have west
or
east.
Probably east.
East.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
perfect south-facing window in that sort of spare room. So where I'm gonna go, I'm gonna set it up right though. Before I bring things in. So I've got some succulents that I want, that are in the ground actually, that I want to, I'll just clean them up and pot them in, I think, some cactus soil
Yeah,
in a pot.
Mhm.
They should be fine.
yeah. Yep. Okay, we have any questions from a chat? No questions? Okay. Otherwise, that's what I have for you tonight, so,
Thank you. It's been helpful.
Yeah, Donna,
okay.
informative.
It was nice trying